Yo, what is going on, guys? Serious here. In today's video, we're going to be starting the 8th part in the GSC scripting series. Now, if you haven't watched the previous videos, go ahead and check them out because you're going to need the code that we worked on for this video. You're also going to need my latest version of my utility, so go ahead and download that if you don't have that already. Today, we are going to be working on the menu structure, or the back end for adding options and menus. This is going to be a lot of stuff today that we're working on. It's about 80 or so lines of code being added to our 200 line base so far, so it's going to be quite a bit, but hopefully we'll be able to get through it pretty quickly. And if you have any questions, just remember to ask me in the comments below and I'll try to answer it the best I can. Okay, so the first thing we're going to do is go ahead and add something to set access. If you remember, this is how we initialize a menu for a player. We're going to add a new array called self.menus. This array is going to be used to store all of the back-end data, just basically the options and the menu structure. We're also going to add a call to a special function called precache options. This is going to be where we define our options. Let's go ahead and add this function to our GSC scripts. Now, we haven't added a new GSC in a while, but if you don't remember, you just right-click the folder you want to add it to, add file. We're going to use an empty GSC and we're going to call it options.gsc. This is where we're going to add all our options in. You don't have to put your functions in here, but this is where you want to put the structure because you're going to be working on this a lot and you don't want it to be in the main part of your GSC script. So we can go ahead and delete this. We don't need it anymore. We can add the function precache options, and we're going to add a little bit of logic to make sure this only runs once per player. If bool self.menu precache return. This is saying basically don't do whatever else is in this function, just cut the function right here and go ahead and return. And then we are going to do self.menu precached equals true. And so if you think about this code logically, if it's not set to true when we enter, we're going to go ahead and get past this if statement and set it to true. And then if we were to run it again, this would already be true and it would just not run the rest of this function. And this is the basic way to initialize a run once function. Then we are going to go ahead and call a function called add menu. We don't have this yet, but we are going to go ahead and work on that next. We're going to add it to none. We are going to put main here because this is the main menu. And we are going to put the title of our base. I'm putting the menu base text as the name of the menu, but you can put it to whatever you want. It doesn't matter. So let's go ahead. Just really quickly before I continue, I just thought of something. This does need to be main and this does need to be none. So don't change these, but you can change this to whatever you want. Okay. Let's go ahead and add the add menu function. We're going to go back into our main.gsc and scroll all the way down to where we are past the set menu open function and come down here because this is going to be where we want our option, our add menu option to be. Add menu parent equals main, meaning by default the parent is main, but you can you don't have to do this default initializer if you don't want to. New ID equals an empty string, and then new name equals new ID by default. These are just setting up default parameters because, especially in this kind of function, you really want defaults. For functions that are used all the time and could potentially have bad things in them, you need to have defaults because otherwise there will be situations where your function is called on accident with the wrong parameters and you would freeze if you don't have defaults, whereas if you have defaults you won't freeze but you won't get the expected result, so it's a lot better for debugging. We're going to go ahead and say if is defined self.menus new ID return. We're going to add a comment here saying don't add the same menu twice. This is because, of course, if the menu is already defined and we call add menu again, we don't want to overwrite the old menu. We just want to go ahead and just return. We'll say menu equals spawn struct. This is a new function you haven't seen before. Spawn struct is essentially just saying this menu variable is a variable that's going to have child variables, but it doesn't have a value. It's really useful for when you want to just set up some kind of structure. If you are familiar with structs in other languages, it's sort of like that, but not really. It's more of just basically an empty parent object. Menu.options is going to be a blank array because we are going to add our options to that array. Menu.m, aka the parent menu, equals parent. Menu.o, aka the name of the option, is new name. And menu.i, also known as the menu ID, is equal to new ID. I generally do not suggest using one-letter variables like this. It's really not descriptive and makes the menu really hard to read, but because we are making this from scratch and we only use this in the menu structure, you should be able to understand what they mean, and they are relatively unique to what their function is, and this will just help us with readability as well in other situations. So I'm making an exception to my rule of never using one name or one character variables. Self.menus new ID equals menu. This is basically saying we are adding this menu to the menus array under its ID. So this is our add menu function. This should be good to go. Now we want to go ahead and add options to our menu. So we're going to need to go into our options, and we're going to add 10 temporary options. We will change this tomorrow, or I'm sorry, not tomorrow, but in the next video, and we will add real options. But for now, we're just going to add placeholder real options. So for I equals 0, meaning I is 0. I is less than 10, meaning run this loop while I is not equal to 10 or while it's less than 10. I++, meaning I equals I plus 1. You don't have to add this comment every time. I'm just doing it for this series because I want you to kind of understand how for loops work because they're really useful. Add option. Main, we're going to add it to the main menu. The name of the option is going to be real option, and then we're going to add I. You don't have to do that, but I like to do that because then each of the options look different. And then we will add a semicolon to finish this, and now we will have 10 options in our default base. It'll look pretty similar to what we've already got, but the difference is these are real options, meaning if we were to set a function, which we will do tomorrow or in the next video, it would actually have something to do. Let's go ahead and create our add option function. Add option menu equals having trouble here. Main, meaning the default menu that we're adding an option to is main. Again, this is just a safety thing. O equals undefined option. If you remember, O is just the option, or like the title of the option. F means function. A, B, C, D, E are all of the arguments that will be passed. That means you can pass up to 5 arguments to a function that you are using inside of your menu. But it doesn't really matter too much right now about that part. Just follow along, and this will make more sense tomorrow or in the next video. I keep saying tomorrow. Option equals spawn struct. Again, we want an empty object to be able to add stuff to. Our menu equals self.menus menu. This is getting our current menu. And if not is defined our menu, go ahead and return. We're going to add a comment here. Can't add to an undefined menu. This means that basically if the menu was not added before we try to add this option, we're going to go ahead and return because we can't add an option to nothing. Then we will do menu.options equal, oh, I'm sorry, I am copying the wrong thing. Here we go. Options.o equals O, meaning we want the option title to be equal to the O parameter. Option.f equals F. Option.a equals new array. A, B, C, D, E. Now, keep in mind, this syntax right here is only valid for Infinity Loader. If you are using GSC or GSX Studio, you're going to need to do something like option dot A equals array, option dot A 0 equals A, option dot A 1 equals B, and then, the rest. This is only for GSC Studio. Like I said, I'm not supporting this in this series, but I just want to go ahead and clarify that because I know there are people that are following along using GSC Studio or GSX Studio. Anyway, then we will go ahead and do rmenu.options, rmenu.options.size. If you don't know what the size operator is, the size is a static variable that is defined for every array that is basically the number of elements in an array, or basically the size of the list, if you think of an array as a list. So for example, the size of this array would be 5 because there are 5 elements in this array. And so this is basically saying we want to add a new element to this array because we are adding it to the end of the array. And we are saying it is equal to option. Let me go ahead and check my syntax really quickly. I'm going to go ahead and actually inject here really quickly, just so that I can make sure that we haven't defined or used any bad variables, because I don't want to go past this function with any errors. You should probably do this occasionally as well. Infinity Loader will catch undefined variables. Here we go. Options. I knew that was going to happen because I'm kind of moving kind of quickly. Oh, here we go. Boom. Let's go ahead and try it again. And we're good to go. Yeah, so I'm making some typos. If you don't know, I'm actually using a second screen to reference my code that I already wrote. That's how most tutorials are done, if you didn't know that on YouTube. So fun fact of the day. Generally, when somebody is writing a coding tutorial, they have a reference up somewhere around them, and they are not actually writing it from memory. Okay, so let's go ahead and change our setup to now actually use the correct options that we have. You probably already know that this structure is now ready to go, but if you remember, we're still drawing option I. Like if we were to go in-game right now, we can go ahead and do that actually, just so I can show you what I'm talking about. So I'm going to go ahead and compile and inject. I'm sure it was already injected before, but I just want to go ahead and make sure. Hopefully we don't run into any issues. Okay, so we spawn in, we open our menu, and we get this default menu. Even though we added real option, you can see we're still getting option. That's because we haven't told it to draw our options. Instead, we've been telling it to draw this placeholder text and this placeholder menu base here. So we're going to go ahead and update this now. Let's go ahead and do let's go ahead and change this to get menu, aka get our current menu, .o. If you remember, O is the option or the text. We need to go ahead and add the get menu function. So we're going to do get menu, menu equals self.submenu, meaning the default menu is going to be our current menu. If not is defined self.menus menu. We are going to add the menu, add menu. We are going to add it to main, and the ID is going to be the menu ID. This means that this will always return some menu. This is very important because this function may not be used in situations that we are guaranteed to have a menu. So we need to make sure that this is set up to where it will always return something, because if it returns something undefined, we may run into a freeze, and we don't want that. Return self.menus menu. Alright, so this should now set up our menu title, and we can go ahead and test this. I'm going to change this to menu base, I don't know, XD. Yeah, why not? Let's go ahead and compile and inject, and then I'll go ahead and check the syntax and make sure we didn't make any mistakes. Good to go. Start up the game. Okay. Open the menu, and now we have the title changed. So that's going to be important when we start adding submenus because we want the title of the menu to change with the submenu. So we'll go ahead and change this back to menu base, and we will go into here and now do our real options. So let's go ahead and change this to be get option I, meaning get the option at this index. And let's go ahead. Oh, I need to do .o because we are going to be using the option, the options option, or the options text. Let's go ahead and go down here and make our get option function. Option equals 0, meaning we want the first option by default. Menu equals self.submenu. Menu equals get menu, menu. Option equals menu.options. Option. I'm making a lot of typos today. Okay. Now, if our current option is not defined, option equals spawn struct. We're going to spawn a default option here. Option.o equals invalid option. Again, this is only for preventing a freeze. This code is basically optional as if you write really clean code, but we just want to do this so that if we're ever debugging and working with things, we will get a little bit more information on what the problem is. Menu.I. Okay. So let's go ahead and return option. And this will now get the correct option. We do need to do one more thing. So if we had an empty menu, currently what would happen is the... actually, we've got two things to do. Get max cursor needs to actually return the correct value if remember we put it to do here. So let's go ahead and put this to the correct thing. Int, meaning we are casting whatever the value is to an integer. If you don't know what an integer is basically a whole number. It can be positive or negative, but it has to be a whole number, meaning we can't have a decimal. And that's really important because this is the maximum number of options, and we don't want a decimal on that because you couldn't have like 5.4 options. It doesn't make any sense. So this would basically just take like 5.4 and turn it into a 5. And that's going to be really useful because the min function that we're going to use, which is going to take the minimum of the two values, or basically the lesser of the two values, is going to return a float, and we want to cast that to an int. Get menu dot options dot size comma 9. This means that we will never have more than 9 options in our menu. So if you were like changing the number of options you have in your menu, you're going to need to change this 9 to, whatever you want it to be. I would actually recommend doing a constant for this, and we can go ahead and do that right now. Well, we'll do it in a different video because we're going to also need to change the size of the menu based on the number of options. So for now, we're just going to leave this at 9. But now this is the correct function, so we're good to go. And we need to do one more thing here. Let's go ahead and remove this wait.025 because we don't actually need that. And we will do if self get max cursor is greater than -1. Would that ever even return -1? Ah, right. I did this wrong. This should be -1 because we actually want to return size -1. Back to where we were. If self get max cursor is greater than -1, we will go ahead and set our slider alpha to the correct alpha. If you remember, we're drawing this invisible originally. So what this is going to do is if we have an empty menu, it's not going to draw the slider. And that's important because if you had a empty menu, the slider position would be wrong. So we just want to go ahead and make sure that we set this up correctly. And actually what we're going to go ahead and do here as well is move this part right here into this if statement because we don't want to set the parent of an undefined option. All right. So let's go ahead and check the syntax, then compile and inject, and we'll check the syntax one more time just to make sure that we don't have any undefined variables or anything like that. Looks good to me, and we will inject and see what we've got. Man, this video has gone on a long time. Oh well, it's the structure, it's the important part of the menu. And here we go, we've got our real options. This may not seem significant to you yet, but if you want to play around, you can go ahead and change the for loop we've got, and you'll notice that the option text actually updates correctly now. And you can see that that issue we had in the last video is actually really fixed. It only happens on the first time it draws. I don't know what's the deal with that, but yeah, there's not really much we can do about it right now, so we'll just go ahead and leave this alone. Anyway, hopefully you guys enjoyed the video. If you did, leave a like. Let me know in the comment section below if you have any questions or if you enjoyed the video. And I will see you guys in the next video. Peace.